Special thank you to our sponsor, iGenX. iGenX isn't just a small business. It's a powerhouse ally ready to tackle your agency's toughest tech challenges head on. Specializing in low-code, no-code solutions, advanced analytics, and project management, iGenX is your go-to partner for both federal and commercial projects. But what sets iGenX apart? As a Salesforce Summit-level partner, the company brings unparalleled expertise across the entire Salesforce ecosystem. From MuleSoft and Einstein and Tableau, the expert teams at iGenX don't just build solutions, they engineer them, crafting robust data pipelines and creating stunning visualizations that drive real results. At iGenX, success isn't just a goal, it's a promise. The team is dedicated to delivering measurable benefits that transform your operations. Ready to partner with iGenX? Contact the team at info@igenx.com, spelled info@eigenx.com.
When we're working on software, when we're working any data engineering project, everything has very firm requirements. The government is, for what it's worth, wonderful at contracting when it comes to writing a contract, making sure the contract language is clear, knowing exactly who's responsible for what. I feel like the government has that part now.
Welcome to GovCom Unfiltered, where your journey through the labyrinth of federal contracting begins. I'm Alexa Choi, your guide and host on this epic adventure. Here, we dive deep into the heart of government contracting, shedding light on the heroic tales of those who navigate its complex terrain. Our mission? To bring you closer to the action, revealing the critical steps, triumphant victories, and occasional pitfalls that our intrepid adventurers face. Your journey into the world of government contracting starts now, and we could not be happier to have you with us. Let's embark on this adventure together.
Thank you for joining us today for GovCom Unfiltered. Today we are speaking with Shane Morris, who is the Post Malone of government contracting. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I just thought it was a funny thing. But anyway, he will introduce himself. And I have to say, before we get started, he's going to be our keynote speaker for the upcoming Innovation Awards event. And I'm super stoked about it. And after today's podcast, you will understand why. So Shane, please tell us.
Yeah. So I guess I technically am the Post Malone of government contracting right now. I did work in the music business for a long time, and I randomly ended up working in federal contracting because a guy contacted me and I thought it sounded like cool work. And here I am now 3 years later. And this is all I do now. I effectively don't do anything else in music. So I'm actually really stoked to now being in this line of work.
Cool. I love it. Awesome. So the first question I usually ask everybody is, and you kind of hinted at it a little bit, you came from music, and now you're here, started at the bottom, now you're at the top. Actually, I don't know if it was the top before, and now you're at the bottom. Who knows? But tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, so I've been doing software engineering for 17 years now, and I started in music because one of the first jobs I had was in music. And when I started thinking about it holistically, a lot of what I was, generationally part of was the transition of music from physical media into digital media. And so when it became digital media, when we started, I guess collectively, that it was a great idea to start just, getting music on Kazaa and LimeWire and just seeing how many viruses we could download. And then we would go, and, start getting music on iTunes. These become big streaming music problems and streaming data problems where we have different ticketing platforms. We have different streaming services. There are now e-commerce stores. And so for me, it was an interesting problem to solve. And I thought that music would probably be my career. During COVID, a lot of the music business obviously stopped functioning. And so it was at that time I made a TikTok, and it was actually a TikTok about something totally unrelated. It was a data engineering and data science project I was working on. And a guy who worked at Booz Allen was like, "Hey, you've got a really cool GitHub profile. I looked you up. You seem to have a whole lot of different projects and things you do. Would you be interested in applying for a job at Booz Allen?" And I was like, "The defense contractor Booz Allen?" Like, I was so confused because I'd never thought, or saw myself that way. And And, within, I think 3 weeks, I had a job offer there. And, it was a great experience working at Booz Allen. I've still got a lot of really good friends there, but, yeah, since moved on, but, I still like doing federal contracting work and, I see myself in this for the foreseeable future.
Awesome, perfect. I love it. We are happy to have you. I mean, as a software developer, as a person who likes to solve problems, but also as like a breath of fresh air from folks that show up in a black business suit or a blue business suit and just, there's this stuffy buttoned up vibe. So, the more tattoos, the more ink, the more gold grills we can bring to this regularly, I'm for that. And I think G2X is for that. We're very excited. So, all right. So next question is, what do you love about the industry, GovCon? And what does not really float in your boat? Like, what do you not love about it?
Well, one thing I really do like about how our industry works is that it is structured. When we're working on software, when we're working on any data engineering project, everything has very firm requirements. The government is, for what it's worth, wonderful at contracting when it comes to writing a contract, making sure the contract language is clear, knowing exactly who's responsible for what. I feel like the government has that part down. Most of the contracting officers I've dealt with, they do it every day, all the time. That's their whole job. And the same thing goes for a lot of the GSs, the SCSs, the CSs that I've worked with. They understand what you're supposed to be doing. So the structure of government, I think, does lend itself well to how we deliver software. I think the downside is, and this is what I want to call it, what do I hate? It's a little annoying. I'll say this, where the government has standards that don't exist in the commercial world. So it's
Right.
easier for a Pepsi or a Nissan or a Toyota to implement new startup from software from a startup. Whereas in the government, when we're, developing, say, a defense environment, I have to go through an entire ATO process. And I understand there's security reasoning behind it, but it is frustrating when you want to solve a problem and then that problem can't be readily solved in sometimes weeks. It often takes months to solve these problems. So
Yeah.
the longer timelines I find frustrating. They're out of my hands, but it doesn't mean I'm not frustrated by it.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the whole FedRAMP process and
Yep.
the ATO and yeah, it's just wow. I totally understand that, having sold technology to the government in the past.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So how did your time in music really influence the way that you show up in industry?
So the music business was interesting because I think there's the glossy side of the music business, and this goes for, the broader entertainment sector, for lack of a better term, where
Right.
whether you work in music or sports or whatever it is, I think some people get the false impression that these are organizations that have a lot of money to flowing around and that it's easy to operate. It's not. There are a few people at the top that make a lot of money. Your top tier artists. Same thing in sports. Your baseball players make a lot of money. But when you
Yeah.
look at the actual nuts and bolts of the operation, these are very razor thin margin businesses. And so it taught me to operate in a way that was extremely lean, where we could, I would say we would make use of the limited resources we had. And so we had to get creative. And so I think now, government is different because we're not, I mean, we're cognizant of the fact that, the people, the taxpayers, us, we are paying the price tag for whatever we do. And so I try and remain price conscious. And so I think that the way that I've been able to be different in the government contracting space is because I was so used to an environment where everything had to be cheap, everything had to be as lean as possible. I come into this environment with the same mentality, especially in the software world, where I do pursue a lot of open source technology over, say, a paid license. I am going to look for the cheapest solution, the cheapest way to do something, because that's the way I'm hardwired. And I think that that's something that I bring to government contracting, which is necessary and needed. Where for a long time there were people who were like, it's I'll deploy the software. I don't really care what the license costs. The contract exists this way. And I'm coming at it from the other side, where I'm saying, I look at it as a win enhancement. And obviously, we're all pursuing a lot of the same opportunities. But if I can say, hey, look, I'm going to reduce your overhead, I know the contracting officers have to respect that, especially if by reducing overhead, we're delivering an equivalent capability, sometimes an extended capability. It's just being able to have this very lean mind state coming into this business and in the federal side. has allowed me to be competitive in ways I think that a lot of my counterparts haven't been, which is why I really do attribute a lot of the success I've had in the federal contracting world to my experiences working in music and entertainment, because being cost conscious is something you just carry with you. Once you learn to live cheap, you don't lose it. Yeah.
It's actually a really interesting answer because, from an outsider's perspective, we kind of think that all music on the inside looks like a Snoop Dogg video. Are you telling me you're not popping bottles of Cristal on the inside and having a big party? You trying to tell me that actually that's just like for show and
Yeah.
they're actually trying to work on a razor thin margin? This is all news to me.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. The way that things appear in a rap video, respect to, people that I know that direct rap videos, and the Colin Tillys and the Rob Witts of the world, if anybody knows them. But that's for show. It's meant
Yeah,
to be an appearance. But
right.
actually understand the nuts and bolts of how music works, that is it's an advertising vector, it's a marketing vector.
Oh yeah.
I I'm not going to call anybody out by name, but most of the rappers in the rap videos you see, those are rented cars. Those aren't Ferraris they own. The bottles they pop may be, actual bottles of champagne, but I've actually seen some clownery go on where people will buy, $15 bottles of Moet and just slap a dump label on it and pretend it is, because if you got to do you got to do a lot of takes with a rap video sometimes. And it's not exactly economical to pop $1,000 bottle of champagne when I get a bunch of $15 bottles. Like, now another take, it doesn't quite work. Yeah, so we've been there.
Well, I really feel like maybe the music industry could come and video at some of these government contractors' houses because they actually have the cars and the Dom
Oh
P laying
yeah,
around.
yeah. Oh, there are some people who do well in this industry. Yeah,
Oh,
for
man.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, so let me ask you the next question. I wanted this conversation to be like a little bit music, a little bit government contracting. What is your favorite song? Like, what are you really digging like right now?
What am I listening to right now? I've been, well, I'm sure it's a new album that came out, but Gesaffelstein, he is kind of this darker industrial electronic artist. His new album came out a month ago, maybe. But yeah, Gesaffelstein's been like my go-to, especially because when I'm working, I like listening to things that are less lyrically dense, where I can just,
Right.
tune in. And then I the new Bleachers album too. I know that a lot of people are probably focused on the new Taylor Swift album, but her co-writer Jack Antonoff is, one of the most prolific writers and producer of our time, and I love the new Bleachers album. He brings a very Bruce Springsteen, New Jersey kind of rock pop vibe, and that's it's kind of funny when people are like, oh, you must listen to a lot of rap music. And I kind of do. I listen to like Bay Area rap from the 90s and early 2000s because I was into it. But I am surprisingly unhip on modern music. Like, I think once you work in the industry for a while, you realize that it's a product. And so you just kind of go down your own rabbit hole and you start
Yeah.
thinking less about the commodity of what it is.
Yeah, I'm a 90s rap and hip hop gal myself, and also from the West Coast, so you know what that means. I don't gotta tell you.
Yeah.
Whole bunch
No,
of
yeah,
Snoop
no,
Dogg
I,
strings.
I pull up, to my kids' preschool, and I'm bumping Andre Nicotina and Mac DeRay, like I'm a hardcore Bay Area rap guy. I think that it shaped me a lot, and it is kind of funny, because I'll pop out my kids' preschool, and all the moms out there are wearing like Lululemon, and I show up and I'm bumping my Mac DeRay and got neck tats and a grill, and I'm definitely a different sight at the preschool, I think,
I'm
than
sure,
most
and
other parents.
I can't wait for your kids to get older where they're like, "Oh my God, Dad, you're so cringe
I
right now."
know. Yeah, I feel like it's going to be interesting watching my kids be rebellious and refuse to get tattoos. Like, no, I don't want to be anything like my dad. You're lame. So I may
That's
end up driving my kids to be super square bears. We'll find out.
That's awesome. All right, so next question. What really inspires you about this industry? You mentioned being a taxpayer, and that's something that I think about a lot, from a fiscal responsibility perspective. But what besides that really inspires you to be a really good contributor to the industry?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of times, when we discuss like the idea of what government does, I
Right.
think the most important thing that I can say is that I try and separate the politicians from government, because the government is, whether you're in the DoD and you're a civilian person in the DoD, you're enlisted, you're maybe somebody who's a reservist. There's the civil servants at NASA. The GS is all over our government. Those people, no matter the position, do what I will call the granular, boring work of making government systems work, whether it's at Medicare and Medicaid, if it's, the people at NASA and NOAA maintaining weather sensors. So the forecasts that we get, and they obviously work with a lot of private sector, those things work. And I think a lot of us take those kind of systems for granted, right? Just the people and the work. And when I start looking at like I don't know, it's probably tens of millions of people that have some sort of government, work. And that's not just federal, there's state government as well. When people think of government, like your school teachers are all state employees, those are government workers. I wish people knew like how many people that they interact with on a daily basis are part of either a county, a city, a state, local government, federal government, and how much we actually depend upon services that we probably just take for granted. And so I try and say that if you're going to have these systems in place, you're going to have all these people doing these services, you're paying them, you should try and make sure that they can accomplish their job easily, that, they like their jobs, one, they're being, compensated fairly, and then that they have the right tools, especially in an extremely digitally driven age where, one person can do more work because they have the right digital, tools in front of them to get more work done. And so that's what I try and, say the drive is that if you're disappointed sometimes in your government, that's fair. Don't whine about it. There's plenty of people that'll whine about it on the internet. I feel like the better thing to do is like, go fix it, provide a better solution, build a better mousetrap. It's on you.
Yeah. No, I always say that when people complain about something, if you're not changing it, you're choosing it.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. I like that. That's a great answer. So let's talk about the innovation awards up and coming. So Shane, what are you going to talk about? What are you going to share with us in your keynote talk?
Yeah, so this is going to be a kind of a big future thinking idea, and it's about decentralized architecture as decision agents. So I am an advisor, and I feel like that's important to disclose for Decision Zone, and their patented product is called Data X, and it's got an interesting story because it's old technology that didn't have a place in the late 90s. So back in 1996, these researchers at Stanford created a brand new programming language called Rapide. And it's different because it's not a decision, it's not a data agent, it's a decision agent. So everything is built upon event architecture rather than data architecture. And the syntax is different. The way we think about programming is different. There's very little about Rapide that will be familiar to people who have learned object-oriented programming languages, Python, JavaScript. It's all very foreign. It was then compiled to Java in 2003. But all of this is really about distributed small systems. So when you think about maybe UAS systems in the DoD, it could be all the IoT devices that exist in healthcare and our hospitals. It could be any distributed system that has events that happen. And so the idea with, Data X and its underlying programming language, Rapide, is that you can understand why decisions happen with an autonomous agent. And so the why is something we don't see a lot in computer science. And so it's a new type of technology in that it is new because it is not currently widely used. Although, right now they're in discussions with, I want to say that there's a pilot program right now happening where they just signed some paperwork, and I think I'm allowed to say this. Anyway, there's a city in South Korea. It's like an enabled smart city, right? Where you might want to have a lot of event-driven chipsets that can make agent level decisions. I think that that's probably the future of where a lot of distributed computers go. And so I want to open people up to the idea that there's a different way of processing any smaller distributed systems. And when we as a society get to that point, and I'm thinking about, not even like the far 20-year ahead, that, 5 to 7, 9-year halo where maybe self-driving cars or something we'd like to implement. We talk a lot about it. We're kind of there, but not quite there. What we really need is architecture and infrastructure that was designed with events in mind rather than data, because data always adds that layer where you have to go render a model, where Rapide, the model, is part of your assessment and how you write an application on that particular event set. And so it's bus level. It's not database level. It's very different to explain. And learning Rapide, you can online. It's cool. I don't recommend anybody. I mean, you can. It's quite an undertaking. I'm still terrible at it. Several months in, it's just that I want to open people's mind up at Forum that there's an entire world we're going to step into that we probably don't know about yet. And I think that, I'll probably be on the bleeding edge of it. But it was because of work that was done 25 years ago
Right.
by random Stanford people, because academics do things that are sometimes without, what's the right term here? They do it without having like an end in mind.
I like that though. And this is honestly the fascinating aspects of what you're talking about are why we picked you to be the keynote. I think this would be a really great thing to talk about, especially as it applies to some of the other use cases that you're going to hear throughout the day, right? There are folks from healthcare talking, there are FedCiv, there's DoD, and they're talking about interagency conversations and decisions and things, and so I feel like once you get up there, you're going to be able to give your talk, but then also tie it back to what people have been hearing the whole day and kind of like help us lean into what's next.
Yeah, and I think that the government should be a driver of that.
Yeah.
I think if we do it right, and I always look at any type of groundbreaking new technology. I mean, even the internet itself was derivative of, a military, I believe it was called DARPANET or whatever it was called. So the military kind of creates what we think the modern internet, is. Obviously, there's a lot of people that, make the World Wide Web Consortium and all those other pieces that kind of really made it work in the civilian world. But I look at that next generation and I say, well, it was Stanford and DARPA that were responsible for Rapide, right? This is another piece of military tech. And so now that we've got another opportunity that we're probably, and it doesn't have to be Rapide. I'm sure that there will be other event-driven architectures that exist in the next 5 years. But when you start thinking about how can the government be in the right place at the right time on day one and start making good decisions in that context,
right.
I think that we get another opportunity, because I mean, I'm not trying to sound too cynical about this, but sometimes the government has been a little bit behind, right?
Yeah.
And so just a little, but this is an opportunity where we can say, no, we don't have to be behind commercial industry on this one. In fact, we could be there day one because it's a new type of architecture. It's a new type of system. Why don't we be there on day one this time? In fact, why don't we drive the market rather than, being behind the market? It could be.
I think that's, and I have a really nerdy question, and because I'm only technical enough to play a technical person on TV.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and it wasn't on the list, so you're gonna have to forgive me.
Yeah.
I usually ask one question that's completely surprised. So here it is. So when you're talking about, besides Rapide, right, a different decision-based software development language, could using blockchain and AI also, I think it's called Celerity. Is that what the language?
Solidity.
Solidity, yeah, Solidity. That's the programming language behind blockchain, right? Could that be built as a decision-making software language, the two together?
Yeah, sometimes. And so the way that I approach any type of blockchain system is I approach it holistically. There are certain architectures that do call for what is essentially not a CRUD system. Usually most databases are create, read, update, delete, right? Well, with a blockchain, you don't update it. You're retrospectively looking at it, what's been proven. It's a good record management system if you're not super high performance, right? You don't have to, write a lot. It's been one of the limitations with the Ethereum derivatives is that they can't work quickly enough. Even the Visa, MasterCards and all that, and I'm not trying to, go way too high level here, but I believe that if the banks and the credit card companies and all of the other financial providers of the world, I believe if they really thought that it could be as performant in the financial sector, they would have done it already, because I've never known a bank not to make more money. And so I think there are limited use cases. I know that, Walmart did a cool blockchain based system for understanding food lineage and produce, and making sure that the correct produce was what was actually on a pallet. And I think that the use case there is limited. When it comes to an event-driven architecture and how you might look at it in the context of, say, a blockchain environment, some events you do want to say, I would like to be able to reference later this event to make sure that it was the correct event at the correct time. And I never want this event to be edited. Blockchain architectures work well for that. I think that there could probably be something that exists in, say, health records, where you might want to say, I want a forever record because this is something that matters. And then there's some events that you may want to go back and edit later. It kind of depends upon the use case. I think in healthcare you can have a couple different spaces where you can have some exist on a blockchain type architecture. You something open source though. It doesn't have to be super heady. I'm trying to think, what is it? IBM's Hyperledger Fabric, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
don't have to make it something that costs a lot of money or is even designed to do a financial transaction. Sometimes you just need a minimal, truth architecture to make sure you're doing the right thing. And so I think that when blockchain systems reach some sort of maturity in an appropriate context, not usually the it can solve every problem context. And I feel like AI is going through that right now. But yeah, I even as a machine learning engineer, I try and be somewhat, skeptical and say, hey, I appreciate that everybody wants to engage in AI. And I think that there's a space for it. I look for more, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Can it be, solved through AI? Is this truly an automation problem? Or is this real AI? Is this something that, requires a model that you're constantly training and updating? And then the last piece, and I'll actually promote, Colina, because they're, a wonderful company that does model evaluation. Remember that AI is not something that is stagnant. A model needs to be constantly evaluated. You need constant experimentation. You're always trying to improve it based upon the outcomes, right? And so I think that where we need to be right now is there need to be more companies like Colina, because the model that you trained 6 months ago, if you feed it new information, you've got new information based upon outcomes. The analogy I say, you try and use it is baseball, right? Because I think we all understand, baseball, balls and strikes, things falling outside, right? Let's say your model's really performant during daylight, right? But if you're ever into a baseball game, there's different shadows and things you can cast on a field. And that may throw your model off. So then you need to retrain a model according to different ways shadows may appear on the field and across the strike zone to make sure that you can call balls and strikes correctly. And so you start with one baseline, and then as soon as you solve shadows, well, now you need to make sure you understand catcher position to make sure that the catcher position doesn't change how the model's interpreting your strike zone. So always remember that the models are ever improving. It's not something that ever sits. It's continuous improvement. And I think that's that's the way intelligence works. We're always improving, right? If we want to really pursue artificial intelligence, well, intelligence is the continual understanding and improvement. Anyway, long-winded answer.
Federal proposals, your voice, less time, exceptional results. Voltron gives you the power of custom language models to reduce proposal development costs by 54% and start to finish submission time by 63%. Voltron is the only AI platform that synthesizes the valuable business development and capture information you obtain to write high-quality, compliant proposal content specific to your company in each solicitation. Stop throwing it over the fence. Schedule a demo today at vultron.ai.
All right, so I'm going to now go into the last two questions that I ask everybody. And, it's my dream to start like a Tim Ferriss, Tribe of Mentors sort of a book down the road where I put everybody's, advice in there. But what if somebody was watching you and looking up to you? What would be the two pieces of advice that you'd give them?
All right. So the first thing is something that it's a thing that I do every single day. It's something my grandmother taught me to do. Every single day, I wake up and before I get out of bed, I'm sitting on the edge of my bed. I say 10 things that I'm thankful for. I just sit there on my fingers, and it can be different things every single day. Yeah. I got to find 10 things in my life that make me smile that I'm thankful for. And it can be stupid stuff. I got myself a pair of shoes that was on sale yesterday for $41, and I was stoked, right? I was like, yep. Got that, the avocados that I had that weren't ripe are finally ripe. And if avocados that you buy a 6-pack at Costco, they're not ripe. Now I'm making guacamole, right? Because I got to get them all at the same time. Yeah. So you find the things that you're going to make you smile and make you happy that day. That's the one. Find 10 things every single morning that are going to make you happy, because it's just a mood improvement thing. Yeah. And then the second thing is, like, it's okay to decide one day that you need to change and do something different, right? I think a lot of people think I'm doing this, so I have to do this forever. I've seen people go to college for one thing, they get into the workforce and they decide that, oh man, I hate this. Yeah. Right. Don't be afraid to pivot. I worked in music for a long time. I had a fun time, but I realized I didn't love it. And I felt a lot of outside pressure because I was in it to continue being this. Like my friends and my peers, my coworkers, they all knew me as this thing. And so, don't be afraid to completely pivot your career. You're going to be on this, rock hurtling through space for, 75, 85 years, whatever it is, maybe 90 or 100 if you're lucky. It is totally okay to switch careers. And it's a good thing to do,
Yeah.
right? I look at the career switch. I'm trying to remember this guy's name. He was a lineman for the Minnesota Vikings during, I want to say, the 60s or 70s, like all pro NFL lineman. He basically, after he's an NFL lineman, he ends up being a Minnesota Supreme Court justice, right? He goes from
Wow.
football to being a Minnesota Supreme Court justice. So like, don't just think, oh, you do one thing, you're a professional athlete, this is all you're good at. He was like, no, I'm going to go and be a Supreme Court justice. Andrew Luck, another guy, football quarterback for the Colts, said, I don't like playing football anymore. I'm going to go be a structural engineer. This is my real passion. Right.
Right.
So I feel like it's okay to switch things up. And, this is maybe for people who are listening to this that, we'll probably end up sharing this on LinkedIn. If you're in another thing, you're like, I think it'd be kind of go fun to do federal work. All right. Yeah. What are you doing right now? My buddy Devin Hill, he was a guitar player. My buddy Pete was a drummer. They're doing federal contracting now.
No way. Really?
Careers. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. That's a great answer, and I totally agree with you. I think about that a lot because I'm a trained professor and I like to teach, and I've also been a dancer, and so like I've had my own lives. I always think like, what if I was doing something else? But I think that's great. Okay, the last question is, what is your superpower, and how did you know when you found it?
Rote memorization. For whatever reason, I'm really good at memorizing things quickly.
Nice.
My dad, and you would do this for me and my sister when we were kids, he would give us like a thing to memorize, right? And he would he would kind of teach us how to memorize things.
Wow.
And I feel like it's a skill. And I feel like it's not just like a skill that we lost. I feel like it's a skill that we all have, but you really have to know how to do it. And there's been books that have been published about this, but in the 16 and 1700s, kids in school would recite long passages,
Right.
multi-paragraph long things. You are capable of much more memorization than you really think you are. And this is actually a credit to, a lot of Hollywood actors that have to, memorize huge sections of scripts, right? And they do it, all to memory. I feel like, but my superpower is constantly developing my memory, trying to be able to read something and then recite it. I feel like it's helped me with learning programming languages. It's helped me being able to really quickly cite text. Obviously, I got the books on the shelf behind me, but I read a lot, but then I'll try and like get the concept down. But if I want to be able to, quote something from memory, like there's an obscene number of things that I can quote from memory just because I was like, hey, I want to be able to know this and cite it from memory. I was always impressed by my dad being able to do that. And so I was like, I want to be like my dad. I'll actually delete that from back. I don't want my dad to ever know I wanted to be like him. Just delete that part. But like, I was like, I want to be like my dad because my dad could recite things from memory. And I was like, dude, that sounds like a really smart dude when you could just click and go.
Right.
So yeah, I think that just rote memorization is the superpower.
That's pretty dope. So Shane, I know that you have content that you create on TikTok. What is your TikTok handle so people can find you?
The TikTok handle is shanemorris.sucks. So it's like DOT spelled out. So it's like the name of my website, shanemorris.sucks, but just the dot is spelled out.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we really appreciated talking to you today. We look forward to having you at the Innovation Awards as our keynote, and I hope that you have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Yay. Thank you.
As we draw the curtain on today's chapter of GovCom Unfiltered, I want to thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey through the intricate world of federal contracting. I'm Alexa Choi, and it's been an honor to navigate these stories of courage, innovation, and resilience with you. Until we meet again, keep pushing boundaries, exploring new horizons, and making your mark in the government contracting universe. Farewell for now, but not forever. Stay tuned for more adventures that await in the next episode of GovCom Unfiltered. Safe travels on your path to greatness, and remember, we are all on this journey together.